All right, here we go. All right, thank you.
Yeah. I I've let them know that we can't hear them on screen. I put it in the message and I'm also voicing it. Hopefully they can hear us.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yes.
Appreciate that, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for everyone's patience on that. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get kicked off and cross our fingers that everything's gonna work for the rest of the meeting. I'm Megan Garrix, your USACE co-chair. We'll quickly go around the room for the folks that are with us at City Hall. Jackie Frazier, Kansas City District Army Corps of Engineers.
Linda Balcom, Balcom Environmental.
Jordan Bennett, Cascade Locks.
Katie Roberts, part of Falconson. Kate Murphy, Columbia Riverkeeper.
Rich Francis, EPA.
Lydia Anderson, EPA. Thank you all. And I'm just gonna go down the list of our board members for anyone that's online. Do we have Jesse Gross? Christy Baptiste? Carl Merkel?
Here.
All right, and Andrea Summerall?
Here.
Thank you all. Okay. All right, so jumping right in. First item of business is our approval of minutes. I do not believe I had, actually. We need to back up a second. Minutes. Did we have those finalized and sent out? I mean, we started talking about it last week.
Yes, they sent them to you, but I don't know if you sent them to.
Whoops. Okay, I apologize. It's been a heck of a couple of weeks and it looks like I did not send out the minutes to my colleagues here, so I will send those out tomorrow morning. So RAB members, would you be okay to do an email vote for approval of minutes?
Yeah.
Any RAB members online, not want to go with that direction? Sounds quiet. I'm hoping that's an agreement. All right, thank you all for your flexibility on that. We can charge ahead. Old business, we do not have any at the moment. New business, let's start with the FFA negotiations. So we have Jeff Matson online. All right, great. Jeff, would you like to provide us an update on FFA negotiations?
Sure. Hey, nice to hear all y'all. Not much to report except that the Army was able to get some updated language regarding both budgeting and funding provisions. I think as we've talked a little bit, how the Corps receives appropriations from Congress is a very convoluted process, and the Corps and Army needed to make sure that DoD and Office of Management and Budget was comfortable with the language. We have some kind of approved language that we've shared with the Environmental Protection Agency and the state regulators, and the Bonneville Power Administration, which also contributes approximately 50% of any CERCLA joint operation and maintenance costs. And so right now, we are working with primarily EPA and the Bonneville Power Administration to make sure that they also are comfortable with the language. As far as the other main provisions of the Federal Facilities Agreement, those have been kind of agreed to in principle by the parties. And so we're really just trying to fine tune the language that speaks to how funding will be certain and in place for future cleanup costs. But that's all I have to report.
Thanks for that update, Jeff. Do you have any questions from our RAB members?
Any estimated timetable?
Yeah, I think that we've heard from the regional administrator of EPA. We've heard from our division commander, General Van Epps, that all parties want to get this FFA to near final form, signed and out for public comment, and giving the entire community, the RAB, among other governmental entities, an opportunity to review, ideally in the next few weeks. I think realistically, let's say that the FFA parties and because Bonneville Power Administration is referenced in the in the FFA, we want to make sure that they're comfortable with the language too, and we're making sure that the language is accurately reflects the funding. If we can get all that in ship shape and kind of agreed to or acceptable to the parties, speaking only for the Corps of Engineers, what happens is that near final FFA is routed to each of the military departments, Air Force, Navy, et cetera, for their kind of concurrence. And then if it meets all of DoD's department's concurrence, then it can be signed by the agency official. I think EPA has a little bit more of a powered down approval. I bet Rich could speak to it. I suspect that it'll be more regional in nature. And so, I mean, if the stars align, perhaps in the next 5 to 6 weeks, if we can get over this hump on this last language, we could see that pretty close to kind of a big review, a public review and comment period.
Thank you. I just have, I guess, one additional question or clarification. You said all branches or all departments within the Department of Defense need to look at it and concur or offer their opinions on it.
Yeah, exactly, Carl. So
not just the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. I mean, the whole everybody that has nothing to do with Bradford Island or the middle of the Columbia River.
Yeah, so this is why a federal facility agreement is so important, because it practically is precedent setting for the Department of Defense. You can't have one military department, let's say, at a naval installation agreeing to certain unique provisions, terms, or conditions that could be practically precedent setting for an Air Force installation or an Army installation. And so as a matter of practice, the military departments all, if you will, keep an eye on one another to make sure that the FFAs that all DoD components enter into are agreeable by DoD as a collective whole.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. And I don't have my chat up, but I think Laura Shira from the Yakima Nation had a question.
Yeah, Jeff, Laura's question was, can you talk about why the language change and BPA were only recently addressed?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Megan?
You want me to go ahead, Katie? Yeah.
All right, Jeff, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so her question was, can you talk about why the language change and BPA were only recently addressed?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand the question. The funding and the budgeting language that Army coordinated with DoD and OMB on was provided to Bonneville Power Administration, council, and staff for review and comment. I think at approximately the same time it was provided to the FFA parties for their careful consideration. I know that BPA is in the process of requesting some updates and changes to the findings of fact section about kind of how Bonneville Power Administration and the Bonneville project kind of came into existence. And I think that they would like some more, I guess, greater descriptions in their kind of direct funding role. And they're in the process of providing those comments. I can't really speak to EPA, but I know that EPA, I think, also has some proposed changes to the budgeting and funding language as well. And I think we have another FFA parties negotiation session later this week, I think on Friday, which we will discuss hopefully EPA's concerns and any red line proposed changes that they may have. I'm not sure if that answers the question, though.
Yeah, but I think what the question what maybe she's getting to is that it's not that the language was just made. I mean, this was something ongoing that we've been waiting from DoD and Army and OMB for a while. That it's been in process for some time. It just has taken a while for it to come down to USACE, for us to be able to share it with the FFA parties. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. No, our lead negotiator, an attorney at headquarters for the Corps, proposed some language and basically shopped it around the halls of DoD, and it had to be coordinated with OMB, Office of Management and Budget, that kind of manages some of the purse strings of federal agencies like the Corps and Army, and to make sure that OMB was comfortable with how the Corps was characterizing its, the budgeting process. And for those that are tracking this kind of inside baseball, OMB, kind of almost on behalf of the Executive Office of the President, has a very robust role in making sure that the president's budget is, that Congress can approve what's in the president's budget. There's a negotiation process there. So what the Corps ultimately receives is a product of a lot of, careful negotiation between the administration and Congress. And so that's why it took a very long time to get some language that met OMB approval. So I'll add that, assuming that we arrive at any language that is substantially different from what DoD and OMB found acceptable, we would have to go back up through that process at the Pentagon and the OMB to make sure that any proposed changes also meets their approval.
And Jeff, there's just one final follow-up. Will BPA be a signatory?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't speak for the Bonneville Power Administration. I know that they have vested interests in the Bonneville project. I always kind of joke that, the Bonneville Project and the Bonneville Project Act is kind of what, how BPA, Bonneville Power Administration, came into existence. And they want to make sure that everything, all the information, all the text in the FFA is sound. I can't speak for BPA, but I have not heard any interest on the part of BPA to be a signatory to the federal facility agreement. And I couldn't speak for the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, whether they would like BPA to join the FFA at this late stage. My sense is most of the FFA parties we welcome BPA's involvement and making sure that they're comfortable with the factual information in the FFA, but I don't think anyone is expecting BPA, Bonneville Power Administration, to be a party to this very important enforceable interagency agreement.
Thank you. And Christy has joined.
Oh, great. Welcome, Chrissy.
Jeff, this is Kate. Just a two-part question. One is wondering if you have any updates on the status of engagement with Yakima Nation. And I'm also, just to clarify about what you were just saying, were you saying that if BPA wanted to be a signatory on the FFA, that they could choose to do so?
Yeah, that gets into kind of the legal underpinnings of Section 120 of CERCLA. I don't want to kind of opine on whether it's appropriate for BPA to be a party. I think that EPA may have thoughts on the propriety of that. So I can't really opine in that space about whether it's appropriate for BPA to be a party to the FFA or not.
Okay, and then any updates on the status with Yakima Nation engagement?
Yeah, I'd probably turn the mic virtually over to Jackie and Megan and their involvement with project manager folks from Yakima Nation or their consultants, whether that's at core-led functions or at EPA's hosting the technical coordination team. from where I sit, I think that we're really excited about having the memorandum of understanding that has been executed among EPA, Army, and the Yakima Nation that provides them a more robust participatory role in exchanging, all sorts of technical information, data, and reports. I do know that the MOU is largely applicable to, it kind of establishes what I kind of describe as a parallel process to the elaborate consultation process under the FFA, and practically gives the Yakima Nation access to project manager meetings and the subject of those project manager meetings. I think Jackie can talk a little bit about how we are accommodating that tribal involvement up until the federal facility agreement actually goes into effect.
Thanks, Jeff. And I mean, again, as Jeff said, we're attending the TCT meeting, so we're engaging with the tribes at those running project updates and getting input. We have provided, and we'll discuss it a little bit during project updates, the phase 1 work plan for the River OU, and that was provided to the FFA parties. Even though it's not signed, again, we're executing it as if it is, and then that document was also provided to the Yakima Nation for the MOU as well. And then they're reviewing that document, same review timeframe as the FFA party.
Thank you.
I'll admit it, from the sounds of it, it sounds like the FFA is pretty near to being signed, given as much as Jeff was willing to discuss it. I know that in the beginning of the negotiations, everything was being kind of held close to our chest. If you would like for me to speak a little bit about EPA's concerns, given what Jeff had said, I think I'd be free to talk a little bit about EPA's concerns.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
so
thanks, Rick.
Yeah. So I think EPA's main concern at all road boils down to Bonneville Power. It's not a government entity where it gets taxes and it's able to allocate those taxes for different things, right? They get their funds through charging customers, through customer payments. And the concern on our end is that if this ends up being, if they have a 50% cost share or whatever the percentage of the cost share is, we don't want to impact the community so greatly that they're going to end up getting double or triple their electric bill because there's a Superfund site now associated with Bonneville Power, So we want to make sure that our concern is that we want to make sure that if there is a certain amount of funds that are required for this cleanup, that we'll be able to have those funds and to be able to use them and not put so great a burden on the community to pay for this. I think the arguing over the margins and things like that, I think that's what it really all boils down to on EPA side is trying to make sure that the customers aren't, I live in Portland, right? I get a water bill that has a $25 charge for Portland Harbor Superfund site. So yeah, I get it. I don't want anyone else to be charged anymore for a Superfund site. So, but that's EPA's concern generally.
I have a question.
Sure.
So how are you implementing that concept or principle? Are you suggesting that BPA's contribution be capped in some way, such as a percentage of total costs or an actual dollar figure?
Generally, no. I think EPA's position would be for if there was a cost associated with a certain action that would be allocated by Congress, that I think we would probably want the Army Corps to request the full funding from Congress first and then work out payments from Bonneville Power after the action has been done, as opposed to trying to get a match from BPA right off the bat. Okay.
And Carl, this is Jeff with the Corps. I can elaborate a little bit on that. What Rich is talking about is typically, since Senator Hatfield was the proponent of some legislation in the early 90s that allowed BPA to basically provide its 50% share upfront. We call it direct funding, and that's really easy and great for the Corps because we put up our 50%, and then the funds from the ratepayers, as Rich described, come across, and then we charge all those funds for joint cost like CERCLA cleanup costs. I think in the event that BPA is unable to provide us direct funding upfront, what's supposed to happen is the Corps uses all of its appropriations available and then looks for that BPA shortfall, what we sometimes refer to as the hydropower share, directly from the U.S. Treasury, and then Treasury out of the Bonneville Project Fund, writes us a check. Hey, here's BPA's amount, or what the hydropower share would be after the fact, after the Corps has already charged its appropriations that are available. The Corps prefers it definitely to get that funds up front, but in the event that BPA is unable to do so, the backup plan that is how it worked prior to the 1990s is the Corps then goes to Treasury and seeks to get that amount after the fact.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, I think it was so much, it was really just kind of the language, really. It's like, can we put that in there? The FFA, it's sort of a little description right there. I think that's really what it was. I don't, like Jeff said in the very beginning, I think that we're pretty close to the end of this. I don't see this as being something very major. I hope not. So, yeah, I hope not. And that springs eternal, right?
Hey, do we have any other questions from online, be it from RAB members or committee members? All right. Okay, we can move on to the next slide then. Great, so following up on RAB membership recruitment, we have 2 empty seats at the moment. The Corps has developed an advertisement and ran that through some other RAB members over email. To give a quick status that I wasn't able to get into these slides, we have started to contact local newspapers and other local organizations via social media, stuff like that. One small roadblock that we ran into pretty quickly was a large amount of lead time to get information to papers, which was something that none of us were actually tracking. So unfortunately, we were not able to get an ad out for this meeting. The Corps' recommendation has generally been to allow any members who are interested to join the RAB to be able to witness a meeting and actually have some, notice that we're gonna have a meeting. So we had been targeting 10 November as a date to get applications back in. Given that we have not been able to get anything in papers yet with the lead time required, we would recommend extending that. Other than that, it is just a matter of determining that date and then getting those ads out to papers and and then moving forward. Are there any questions or comments from RAB members on that?
So we'd have applications open to the 10th, and then as members, we would review the applications that next week at the meeting. How does?
That was the goal, if we had gotten the ad out prior to this meeting, but we weren't able to. So that 10 November date is what Megan was saying, we'll probably need to push. So we can pick a new date.
Oh, okay, I got you. Okay.
But yes, that would be the intention, that the application would come in, and then the next meeting, you guys would be able to discuss.
Well, we wanted to give them a chance to actually witness a meeting first. Is that?
Again, I think that's the question for the RAB, is the preference still. I know we'll have a little bit more discussion on when the next meeting may be after we get through, so maybe that's the right time to kind of maybe bring it up again then.
Yeah.
Based on when the next meeting is.
Yeah, that's what I would recommend is when we're looking at the next meeting dates, talk about when we want to put that ad out, or when we want to have the due date for applications.
And did you say you sent out like that ad, the content of the ad?
Yeah, via email,
Okay,
yeah, I can send it to you again, I know you're on leave for some
Yeah.
time.
thank you,
Mhm.
that'd be super helpful.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
still, I'm sure I've got it somewhere, I'm still making my
No
way through.
worries, as a person who regularly gets 5,200
Yeah.
I'd say any other rad members that need a copy of it again, you know.
Yeah, by all means, please just shoot me a message, give me a call, and I'll be happy to, send it out to you once again. There's also a list of, organizations that we're targeting. But of course, we'd also love to have the RAD members themselves, if you're part of an organization, if you have a way to, get information out to the community, we'd love to have you share this out to, anyone who's interested. All right. Any questions, comments online? All right, we can move forward to our next slide. Okay, so also related to membership of the RAB. Fortunately, Glenn Bell has resigned as our community co-chair. He was not able to make it work with his schedule with a busy fire season and other commitments. And he has resigned from the RAB. So moving forward, we would love to have a new community co-chair come on board to support. I've kind of listed some of the responsibilities here on the slide, but essentially it's sort of helping facilitate this meeting. The organization of slides and stuff like that, that's typically something the core has been providing. We're happy to continue providing. But facilitating and representing the community would be the main two responsibilities of that community co-chair. Let me go to the next slide, please. We can talk about the actual procedure. So there's a couple options in which we can nominate a new co-chair. One of those is, requesting if the previous community co-chair, if they have a nomination. We can also put together a nomination committee of just a few draft members. They can nominate to the rest of the RAB who they would recommend. And we can also have members can nominate at the floor, they can self-nominate, so there's quite a lot of opportunities here that we can actually proceed with electing a new co-chair. I think the real question is just when do we want to put that on the agenda? And how much time folks might want to prepare, and whether that's considering whether they want to be a co-chair or if they want time to prepare nominations. So I'll have the floor just for a few minutes for RAB members. If you have any initial thoughts on preferences, how to proceed with nominating committee co-chair.
Question,
Yeah.
how many members are you down right now?
From the original group, we had now 3 folks resigned in total.
Okay,
So for total members, we have 6 members, not including myself.
okay.
I guess I'll just say as the USACE co-chair, I would like to make this as easy as possible for a community co-chair to participate. I'm not looking to put on a lot of organizational responsibilities, such as getting printed slides out to folks or anything like that. But yeah, of course, this is a spot that is intended to be open for a community member to have the similar role, so we want to have that open.
is this something we're gonna try and decide prior to trying to get the additional members, the co-chair? Or do we wanna do like an interim situation until we have additional, I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
that's a
a-
great question. I think we can go various ways, just depending on, what preference of members is.
I only have questions.
Okay. In terms of facilitating the meetings, I'm happy to continue to do that until we have even through as we have a community co-chair come on board. So there won't be an issue of, continuing meetings without a community co-chair in terms of just the facilitation of this meeting.
Thank you.
So I guess the question is, does any of the
Yeah,
current
I
Brad
was
members
gonna
want to be
say
a co-chair?
Yeah.
You know, raise your hand now,
No,
I
I mean,
guess, right?
I
Otherwise,
guess-
we'll-
we're still getting our feet wet and learning this process and waiting for the FFA to finish. It kind of seems like it may be a ceremony, I can't say that word, ceremonial role. As this thing gets going, are there more duties that position may take on when we actually do more public outreach? When we get, I don't know, to me, I feel like we're still kind of just hitting this wall and not making progress, maybe this,
Yeah.
but.
Can we go back one slide real quick and display the responsibilities? So these responsibilities, a lot of this is from our just our procedures
Yeah.
themselves. And just going down point by point real quick, regarding preparing and distributing an agenda, that's something the core has prepared, and we've always solicited agenda items. So that role I don't see significantly changing as a co-chair. Coordinating RAB questions and concerns to be answered. A lot of the questions do come to the core, so that anything that comes to the core is of course our responsibility to answer to the community. Helping us solicit questions from the community is really kind of a responsibility that all RAB members share as leaders of your organization, leaders in your community. And then a lot of this kind of goes down into regular responsibilities that members share, encouraging open community dialogue and participation at our meeting, communicating any feedback on response activities, escalating community issues and concerns, assisting with dissemination of information. All that is generally things that RAB members are doing as members of various organizations and various communities.
More help facilitating
Mhm.
things.
Yeah, a lot of the extra work will really just be us sitting down together, deciding how we will share the facilitation of any given meeting. So with Glenn, it was usually let's talk for 10 minutes about a week before the RAB and figure out who's gonna take what topic. That's what it's been so far. In terms of like, let's say reviewing the work plan is an upcoming activity.
We're presenting on the work plan,
Yeah.
but if there's any questions or comments, then usually we would make sure that those would go to both the chairs. And kind of just, again, keeping track that ensuring that the core is doing their part to responding to comments and concerns appropriately and timely.
I think Jeff might have a comment or a question. He's got his hand raised.
Okay.
That's all right.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I just wanted to add that I think I heard a remark about how maybe the community co-chair role might increase, after the federal facility agreement is in place. I just wanted to kind of clarify that the Corps' responsibility for community involvement and public engagement and how we try to discharge that responsibility through the Restoration Advisory Board, that exists whether or not the parties are still arguing about an FFA. And The Corps intends to continue making progress in the interim. And so, at least from where I sit, our view is that the RAB serves a very important role now and into the future. I think it's altogether possible there might be more investigation and removal actions on the horizon, but I just wanted to emphasize that the RAB role, and especially the community co-chair role, there's really not a RAB without a community co-chair. And so I just want to help empower, maybe encourage a representative from the community from any quarter that's interested in this project. If it was never added to the national priorities list, if if any of the parties just can't get to acceptance or approval for the FFA, we still have a very important role to engage the community in the interim. And so that's my ask, I guess, is to make sure that folks stay committed to the public process. The Corps can return to public meetings, but I think it's generally it's our that this forum is very important for continued interest and engagement with the community.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there, Katie, I mean, if someone decides to nominate as a co-chair, in this case, Glenn Bell's just fully resigning. But it could be a situation where a RAB member just goes, I just don't want that extra responsibility, still want to be a RAB member, but I don't want that. I think that's more situations where they maybe nominate someone else to take over as co-chair. So that it's not like a all or nothing deal, that it's not something that you can't back from, if that makes any difference to folks.
You can always hold our feet to the fire, we cannot hold your feet to the fire.
And that's kind of what I'm getting, as the role of the co-chair is to make sure, as a de facto leader of the community side of it, make sure the Corps and EPA is actually doing their job.
Being responsive and timely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Usually, yeah. For lots of other RABs, it's the co-chair is already a leader in the community, maybe a mayor or something like that, or police fire chief, something like that. So someone that's already kind of knowledgeable about, being in a leadership position. But mostly it's the person that asks the most questions and holds our feet to the fire the most, and really digs in and says, well, this doesn't look right, and that's more than anything, that's what I found the community co-chairs to be, the people that ask all the questions, or that most of the questions, and really take it upon themselves to be that voice for the community. Because a lot of times, if you don't have that, then it's just going to be a bunch of people. Any questions, any concerns? People are just going to be quiet unless you have that one person that's able to take the mic and be that voice. And that's the main reason.
Yeah, you make sure that, hey, you guys said that you would get back to us on this, and we have yet. Make sure, again, we're not doing it out of, trying to work around it, but if something slips, that accountability, it helps us get that extra accountability. With that said, is there any general interest from any of the RAB members at this point? And if there's not, then it sounds like it's maybe something that will wait until there's ability more response.
I mean, I'll definitely say I'm interested in it, but really based off what Rich just said, I am pulled in so many different directions. I don't know how much focus I could give this to really be a good co-chair. So. But I will do it if needed, I guess.
So some people see greatness, some people have it thrust upon.
So at this point, with no one clearly self-nominating, I would say we can push this to the next meeting, see how we're doing on RAB recruitment, and just readdress as we go along.
So, Jordan, Did you self-nominate?
No.
Okay. Just
The three of them, not how I interpret it either. I strongly consider you, right, Jordan?
Yes, if asked to, I
He
mean,
could self-nominate for an interim.
Yeah.
Right, so, I'll, maybe request a quick vote from our RAB members. I guess my recommendation from, just where I'm sitting is that we, table this to the next meeting. I'll just go around the room quickly for, a vote. Jordan?
yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Carl? Did we lose Carl? No, he's here. All right, Christie?
What's that? I'm sorry, I missed the question.
All right, Carl, my recommendation is that we table the, any discussion, decision-making on community co-chair until the next meeting and revisit it then.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. That sounds sensible to me. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Carl. Christie?
Yes.
Andrea? She's there. Maybe she's not okay. All right. I'll call one more time. Andrea?
I'm sorry, I was off for a minute, but I am fine with that.
All right, thanks very much for that. Okay, so all members in agreement, we will bring this to the next meeting and discuss again. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is a project update. We don't have a slide on that, so I'm gonna pause here on the slides and provide that. Okay. All right, so we have a few things to bring to you today. We mentioned a little while ago, a phase 1 work plan for the river operable units. So that has been drafted up. We've sent that out to regulators as well as tribes through the technical coordination team that's led by EPA. That's going to be out for approximately another 45 more days, give or take, a total of 60 days, asking for comments back in 2nd of November. That's about all I had regarding that particular work plan, but in terms of a RAB, our intention would be once we start getting we've gotten our comments in from our regulators, from the tribes, that we would present to the RAB on that work plan.
Yeah, we're trying to kind of really focus in on when the best timing it is. I think right now we would propose maybe like December timeframe where we would have gotten comments, had a chance to address any major ones so that it was at least very close to what we would be executing to, again, get any input. This is just, again, kind of giving some background on it. This is under the current task order with Bryce through Seattle District Corps. But their contract is pretty constrained with the type of contract and the scope of it. And so we'll go into a little bit more where this is why we're separating it out into phases, basically. Some of it is we want to get some information before we sample something else, but some of it's just, unfortunately, just the constraints of the contract. But we also, with, again, the timing of presenting it to you is because we're really been trying to work with regulators and the tribes to get their input as we're going through it, because we have like the team has a limited window to sample in that boat restricted zone behind the spillway. And so we want to try to get ahead so that we can keep that schedule and not miss that sampling window. So December is when we would look to kind of try to present that work to the RAB. Megan, if y'all go ahead and take the next one to kind of leads into about their contract. Sure. Jacob. So we procured a different task order through Kansas City District and it will give to Jacobs. And it's cost reimbursable, which means that we have a lot more flexibility ultimately with what we need them to do. Their scope has a wider scope. We're bringing them on to help finish both the supplemental remedial investigations for both operable units, through record of decision, and some other tasks as well. And that award, I didn't think it was gonna be till like the end of September, but it could be within the next week. And get them on and get started. And so they'll be taking over the remainder of the investigation. So when we do like these next work plans, we'll have a lot more opportunity to be able to incorporate comments more. And so one thing that we will do when we present the phase one is there may be comments where we kind of have to say, really good comment, but we're gonna have to kind of hold it here on the side. But when we come back around to going out again, we have that comment. So we just may not be able to address it to the best of our ability right now, but we'll have it. We'll have that input and we'll keep it for when we're able to incorporate it easily. So.
So that was a good chunk of information. I do have some other stuff to talk about project status wise, but I want to pause real quick for any questions, comments from RAD members. Alright. Okay, so move forward. Another technical piece I want to talk to folks about today is some dredging that's happening over at Bonneville. So navigation lock one is having some dredging done. My understanding is that dredging hasn't occurred there since the 1990s.
Yeah, 1993.
Yeah, so quite a bit of time. We have received a sampling plan for some additional virus samples to be taken at those sites due to the fact that the proximity to Bradford Island, the possibility for that contamination to be in that area. The plan is to take 2 samples at places where we have previously taken more surface level samples and to go down roughly 4.5 to 5 feet in the core. That sampling plan has been reviewed by the Bradford Island government team as well as regulators, and I believe EPA did provide that out to some tribes.
We did.
Correct?
We
Yeah.
did, correct. The tribes didn't provide comments to you directly, but they did provide comments to us.
Yes. Yeah.
And we incorporated those.
Yeah, and all those comments have been received at this point. The dredging itself, I believe. Well, I don't have my email up, so apologies for that. I believe what I was told is that was gonna be mid to late October, the time frame for that. We have all the comments in. I believe all those have been incorporated at this point to EPA satisfaction. Am I speaking out, Sharon?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
We found it, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was recalling the email that we just got today and realized, oh yeah, that it's already been taken care of, yeah. We had some concerns, and Army Corps has addressed those. I think that a couple of points about this area is only about 100 feet by 100 feet square. There's gonna be no leave surface behind. This is the lock area, so it's all concrete down underneath whatever sediment is there. 5 feet over, 40 years, 30 years? Probably pretty homogeneous all the way down, but thankfully the Corps is gonna take, Army Corps is gonna take some core samples down there, so we do know what's going down in the subsurface. Yeah, and after that, you know, we'll see. I don't like to make predictions about what we're actually gonna find down there, but once that happens, we're gonna see, so.
Yeah, and this is more of just an example where, I mean, this activity is part of just the, operations and maintenance activities at Bonneville. But something where we're making sure that that coordination is happening between our teams, so that they're doing an activity that needs to be adjusted based on where they're sampling and what that activity is at both sides, and same with us, whatever we're doing, we're coordinating that with operations and maintenance, so that we don't negatively affect their work either. So this is that, just kind of bringing that transparency of the coordination effort to making sure that the routine O&M activities do not negatively affect the Bradford's NPL site.
What will be done with the spoils?
So it does depend on what's found for the sampling. If it was found to be acceptable, the plan would be to, place it in water downstream.
Yeah, I think their screening levels are, for Portland Harbor cleanup levels, I think are 9 parts per billion for PCBs. And I think the screening level for this is 0.04 parts per billion, I think, something like that. It is a couple of orders of magnitude lower than what would be a general cleanup level for. Or at least if we were to use Portland Harbor as a guide, the cleanup level for here would be an order of magnitude or two higher than what their screening level for aquatic disposal would be. So there are controls, but it's not like they're gonna find something that's gonna be as hot as what you would find there, and they're just gonna dispose of it, so, yeah.
And then if they're not acceptable with the testing?
I'm gonna have to go back to the plan. I do not remember exactly.
It would be disposal in a landfill.
Yeah.
Probably subtitle D.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
I would
expect
assume
that it would be hot enough to require going to a subtitle C.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing, this is part of the lock, so this is not in the, the flow lane of the river. So, BMP's best management practices for having silt curtains and things like that, I don't think we're gonna need those. I think it's a pretty straightforward operation. And given the fact that they're gonna be dredging everything and there's gonna be surface, I think that 2 cores 75 feet apart, I think would be sufficient for characterizing that area.
Any other questions, comments? Anything online? All right. Okay, so I did have one final update for project status, and that's to talk about visitor center displays. This has been a question I believe came directly from members about would we provide some displays at our visitor centers in Bonneville. We have been having quite a lot of talks about that on the core side. We've identified areas in the Oregon side and the Washington side visitor centers where we can display. We've been talking to the folks out at those centers to determine what kind of media they can actually support there. So they told us they really prefer these stand-up sock style displays. So essentially,
Was it the stand-up one? It's the stand-up poster, it's kind of like what we had in the corner where it's the silk screen, the
Yeah.
silk. It's called a sock style display.
You can move it around.
Yeah, basically like a freestanding metal display with a, in very large image piece on it. Our intention is to have a few of those. The contents we're still kind of working out in terms of like exactly what information we want to have on the display itself. And what information we want to have behind a QR code. We would like to have kind of a QR code available both for information about Bradford Island and for fish advisory. So as there's pertinent updates, that information can get timely updates to a website versus reprinting an entire poster or display. And we would also have a rack of fish advisory notices in various languages for folks as well.
Great.
So I think the plan would be once we have a planning meeting to kind of brainstorm what should be on the displays. I think when we get far enough, again, it'll be great for the RAD members to look at that and have that view of, okay, coming in from the public, are we displaying the right information for someone that's gonna look at it? And then the QR code also helps so that, again, they're not there very long, but they want more information, so they don't have to sit there and try to get everything they've got somewhere they can still reference after the fact. Or they don't want paper copies, especially like for the fish advisories, but we'll definitely provide those to get that input. So that we get that good public eye of that information to make sure we meet the mark.
Cool. And are y'all collaborating with Oregon Health Authority and Washington Department of Health on some of the actual content for, like, the fish advisories, for example?
Cause I think we already have what they produced for those, we're just making sure they're printed and displayed.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they produced that.
they have the
previously.
updated materials,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, so that would come to record.
That's great.
So,
That's a fun update, that's good.
no, that's a great suggestion, so, yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, having gone and seen the fish window is, I think that they point out that's a pretty good opportunity to have a display there, especially if you had a picture of salmon and going, this is okay to eat, like what you're seeing in the fish window is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think for, especially the visitor center on the Oregon side, we've selected the floor that has like the history of the project, so we felt like that was the appropriate place for those posters to be for at least the Oregon side. I don't know if that's the case for the Washington side, maybe set, I don't know how the setup is different, but that was kind of what we thought. And then again, they can roll them down, move them if they've got something special going on, or if they need to rearrange, and it makes it a little bit easier for us to accommodate that too.
That's great, yeah. And I appreciate, yeah, I think it's a great idea to, do another, like, sharing it with the RAB, making sure we're covering all cultural sensitivities. and everything.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we're only looking at from our perspective, we can try to guess
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
people want to hear about, but we need to make sure to get checked on that.
Yeah.
So we need to do the checks and balances on that.
I think that's great progress, though, to have those displays come.
Yeah, cool. And it was a recommendation about this rabbit. so
Yes, yeah, that's
It's
a
a
great
very good
suggestion.
recommendation,
Yeah.
Is there any, you said you were gonna have it in multiple languages, any ideas what those languages are going to be? Yeah, I'm sure that the RAB would have an idea of the predominant languages besides English.
Yeah, I don't know those languages off the top of my head. We did get some input from visitor centers on the most common languages of visitors, that come through, and so we'd be, very much wanting to have those available.
I think that was really only in terms of the fish advisory. I don't know if we talked about, we were gonna need multiple languages for our.
Yeah, that is
Mhm.
general project, yeah, we were really focused on fish advisory for that. But that said, yeah, I think maybe on, especially with a web component, that might be something that we need to look into.
I think that OHA, from the last update I had, was going to have theirs in, English, Spanish, and then simplified versions in traditional Chinese, Russian, Ukrainian, Vietnamese, and Korean will also be available.
Okay.
So maybe we can link to, all of that.
I think what I read was that Russian and Ukrainian are probably the more
Needed.
predominant
Yeah.
language
Yeah.
here besides English. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, good news.
Further questions, comments from RAD members on this or any of the project updates? We'll open it up to any community members if they have any questions, comments on the forest project status.
Will the Brad members ever get a tour of the facility at some point? And we're talking about all these different things and the remedies, and all I know is this island out there in the middle of the river. I mean, to actually put eyes on, here's this exact location we're talking about.
I would love to be a part of that tour.
They take you on that
Okay.
tour.
Yeah, no, we
I don't know how to coordinate this many people on that tour, but
Yeah, if there's interest from the RAB in doing, like a larger tour altogether, we will happily organize that. I can put out a survey for interested dates, and then we can work from there.
Yeah.
yeah, that works.
Got it. Okay, great. Excellent suggestion.
It really does, it really does matter. Well, like you said, it's kind of esoteric right now.
Yeah, it's all abstract,
So,
yeah.
it's all abstract on the paper. When you really get there and see it, and you see.
Some of
well,
it's really surprising.
Some of it's not that big.
Surprising.
This doesn't seem like that big of a deal.
It's not like glowing ooze, is it?
Right, yeah.
There's one area that even for our, headquarters commander, when he went out and saw, he was like, putting his arms out, and
doesn't even seem that big.
Yeah.
There's like pictures, we talk about it, but you know, just a couple of me here, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a very different perspective when you see it, so.
Yeah, the landfill is a lot smaller of a footprint than I had thought in my head. And Goose Island is a lot bigger than I had thought in my head. You know, you look at Goose Island, it's only like 800 feet. That's a lot of, 800 feet's pretty big when you're really standing there looking at it. But yeah, no, it's a very worthwhile experience. I would very much encourage any community members that, you know, any RAB members that can attend a tour to do so.
Christy agreed, she would be very much interested in it.
Right, yeah, all right, so after this meeting, I'll follow up with RAB members, I'll probably just throw out another doodle poll like we did for RAB training. And we can figure out some dates that work for folks.
Yeah, and again, I don't think it's a huge ask if we need to break it up, if we can't get all in one. We'll get who we
Yeah.
can and we can do another one. We'll
Yep.
make it work for folks.
Yeah, I was just about thought the same thing, we can have multiple, yeah, no.
A cool group and an uncool group. We won't tell who's.
If I'm there, it's the end.
That's fine, actually.
Any other questions, comments before we move on to the next item? All right, I want to make plenty of time for this. We have a short presentation on a schedule overview, and Jackie's going to provide that for us today.
Although, you know, we kind of decided, so because all the FFA parties had agreement in principle on the site management plan, even though we can't provide the entire document, we felt at least being able to start being transparent about kind of this overall schedule. Obviously the FFA is not signed, you know, it's, there could be tweaks, but again, this has kind of been the standing schedule that we've agreed to. Just a few kind of caveats before we start. Right now, we're just trying to just be as factual as possible. These tables are literally right out of the site management plan, so all the dates are for when they're gonna get submitted to the FFA parties and documentation for the MOU. As we get more into the project, we will provide a schedule that is more refined and more detailed for the RAB of when we're gonna either present it, when we're gonna provide it for review, when it's gonna be final, all those kind of dates. We'll start adding those to the fuller schedule, but wanted to at least kind of give this bigger picture. This schedule is based on what we know right now. This is again before Jacob's on board and we have their input to the schedule. Just with any environmental project, as we collect more information and know more about the site, that will feed into the schedule. This schedule and the site management plan gets updated once a year. Our big responsibility for us is to be communicating anything that could impact the schedule to the FFA parties. So that we're all in agreement with what we're doing. Go to the next slide. Or that one. While we're trying to get to the next slide, okay, there is. This kind of served a couple purposes. It kind of lets you know, here are the big milestones, as we go through the CERCLA process. Those submittal dates to the FFA parties, obviously, it can be kind of jarring at first with seeing like how long that process can go. Obviously, we want to try to pull that to the left as much as we can as we go through the project, but documents take a certain amount of time to develop, required reviews based on core processes, then making sure that each level of review is done before we provide it. It all kind of feeds into it.
Jackie, just for folks who may not know, could you explain some of those acronyms?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. I should have written this out the first time. So SMP site management plan. For the first two, where we have supplemental RI work plan and supplemental RI report, that's remedial investigation. And then there's a bit of a gap that you can see between that work plan and the report. And that's right now that, again, the FA parties have agreed that we're looking to do some sort of early action. That's where that kind of comes into place. That we're looking to do that before that kind of official RI report comes in. So that's what, not that there's work being completed, that's the plan. Again, as those conversations continue with the FFA parties with exactly how that will play out, the mechanism that the early action will happen, we will then add those details to the schedule. This is just to show that we're assuming some sort of early action in the upland at this point. The further we go out, the bigger swag that the the assumptions of the schedule is based on. And really anything out a year or two tends to get even more and more assumptions. But again, we will continue to provide regular schedule updates and those changes as we go through the project. And then as things change, if we find new information that leads us somewhere else, and then, everyone will understand the rationale for why the schedule changes. Next slide. Oh, went too far. And then here is the overall schedule for the river. And again, this is where we talk about where we're right now assuming kind of phase 1 and phase 2. And for two reasons, some of it's, collection of certain data before we decide on locations for kind of the next set, but mostly due to current contract constraints that we are alleviating with this new task order with Jacobs. Of course, like I said, there's no gap. We're not assuming an early action at the river at this point, but it will be on the table at some point as we get more information, if we feel like that is we have enough information to do something like that to make progress. But right now we're not assuming any sort of early action, just with where we are with data collection at this point.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, what does OU and SMP stand for?
I went right over OU. OU is operable unit. And so for this one, we basically they kind of, for NPL and Superfund sites, breaking them into kind of these areas that have similar, it's either based by media or area. It can kind of be separated a couple different ways. So this one's, we've got river and upland kind of separating with how we're collecting the data, assessing risk, and remediating. So you'll hear operable unit a lot for like that.
Okay,
I
guess.
And then
I guess
oh, sorry, go ahead, Carl, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I guess I'm really not clear on what this schedule is for versus what the schedule is for in the prior slide.
So because the data collection and development of deliverables will be different for how we look at the upland contamination, like on Bradford Island, versus the in-river contamination. So that's how we kind of separated. Those are kind of what we call our two operable units. Each operable unit goes through its own CERCLA process. So it's going to have a separate work plan, separate investigation report, separate feasibility study, which is that's the different technologies to clean up the site, different alternatives, and its own proposed plan to how to clean up the site, and its own record of decision on what the remedy is going to be. Does that make sense, Carl?
Yeah, I guess so. Thank you. And I suppose related to that, this one, looking at the bottom right-hand corner and looking at the prior slide, the bottom right-hand corner for this one, Are you anticipating the work, the actual cleanup work being completed for this one by 2037 and the one before by 2038 or 2039?
That's currently what the overall schedule has estimated. And if for any reason we continue investigation, we find a different area that has to have its own track, it would become its own operable unit, it will have its own schedule, its own set of documents. Because then, if we kept them, I'll put it this way, if we kept them all together, you wouldn't be able to properly like assess the risk, because you're looking at the risk in sediment is gonna be different to the type of risk that you have on land. And you don't want one investigation or treatment to hold up the other one. So sometimes, again, that's kind of the way that it's broken out, so that they're on their own track, so they get addressed in a timely manner. Or just due to the nature of them. So they'll be tracked separately, managed separately. We'll have to be providing updates on both of these. And any changes where sometimes we don't necessarily have like a new operable unit, or the boundary of the operable unit may expand based on the data collected. And so right now, with kind of just doing bigger schedule, like I said, it can be really like shell shock with like kind of seeing that data so far out. But like I said, the further we go out in those different phases, because we're not far enough along, the assumptions are more conservative until we get further in the process.
Yeah, it very well could be, and this is Rich, it very well could be that next year, whenever this gets updated, or if it gets updated next year. When it gets updated, you very well could see the remedial design, remedial action work plan, you could see those shift to the left, conceivably. Conceivably, you could see something shift to the right too, we don't, let's all be realistic here, we could be aggressive, or things happen,
Yeah.
so,
We
yeah.
could go out with sampling, and then we get a lot of data that leads us into another direction, so that means, wait, we need to do more sampling before we can, fully have the nature and extent characterized, be able to fully assess the risk, and so it pushes things out, but like I said, that's where our part is, to be transparent with what we're working on and what's feeding into those changes, so everyone understands why things are changing, whether it's to the left or right.
And I think there was some other discussions, like, at least for the N River, there are some opportunities perhaps for some early actions out there, depending on what the data shows.
Right.
Perhaps there's some pilot studies that we could do to really get to some of the hotter areas. Some tests that we can run, things like that. So there are the opportunities for early actions in the river too. And we're really looking for that as well.
Yeah, and we do have agreement to assess those at certain points, but since it was more uncertainty, it was not assumed in the schedule at this point. But it absolutely could be incorporated at a later time.
Yeah.
Jackie, was that the end of your slide for scheduling?
Yes.
Okay. Round members, any other questions, comments on this information?
This might be a stupid
I
question.
guarantee you.
No such thing.
I guarantee it's not.
No such thing.
So, in my mind, I pictured some contaminated dirt, you show up with a backhoe, you throw it in the truck and you haul it off. Like, why does that take 30 years? And as a RAB member, how do I explain that lengthy process to a community member?
Really good.
Really good question.
And I get the federal government moves slow, and the whole point of this and the RAB is to make sure we do it right the first time, because not giving a crap is how we got here in the first place. So making sure it's done correctly now and doing it slowly, I get that point, but I guess how do I explain that to community members?
Well, I can't speak for previous prior to listing, we came in after listing, or at least I came in after listing, there were some EPA people that were associated with this beforehand. So I can't really speak to what goes on before that.
Well, I'm talking about like
Where we are,
nineteen thirties when they dumped all this stuff and nobody
Right, but-
really cared.
Right, but
That's
where
what
we
got
are,
us here.
I mean, if you wanna talk about where we are now going out in the future, I could definitely answer that.
Yeah.
As far as previous, why is it taking so long to actually get to this point? That's the reason why we have Superfund, right? Because exactly like you said, doing it half-assed is how we got here,
Yeah.
basically. And as far as going forward on this, look, when we went to the meeting, I'll say this a little bit, we proposed a more aggressive schedule, EPA did. We tend to do that for better or worse. We like aggressive schedules, whether those work out or not, that's argument for debate. And the court came back with something a little bit less aggressive, I would say, and this is where we met in the middle. I think that we could meet these, but we want to be deliberate. We want to make sure that in 2027, 2028, whenever these decisions are being made, hopefully sooner, but if they're being made in 2028, that if someone asks, well, why didn't you think of this? Why didn't you think of that? Why didn't you think of capping this area instead of dredging? Why didn't you think of dredging instead of capping? That we can say, we did, we looked at that, we addressed it, and we went to the community and we asked the community what they thought and what you thought and everything else.
Yeah.
So it's all about being a deliberate process.
Yes, and each CERCLA phase has its guidelines and requirements and regulations that we have to follow, and that can add to it. But when we have situations, what we're trying to look at early actions where we have something where we feel like there's a need, where we can have this alternate schedule that we can be a bit more aggressive. When the need fits, as we get the data and well, it's a risk, but it's not such an imminent risk, it allows us to go through we have to kind of balance that, and we do try to assess that to see if it's an imminent risk. Versus if we don't have enough information, well, by going in and doing something, we can make it worse.
Yeah.
And so again, deliberate.
And if you think that every one of these documents on here is at least a 3-month turnaround.
Oh,
Right, when they said, like, the phase 1 supplemental RI work plan, they gave it to us on September 1st. We're not gonna get comments to them until November 1st or 3rd, until
Yeah.
November 3rd. So then they're gonna have 2 weeks or a month to turn that around. So then you're looking at December before they can even answer our initial comments. So there's 3 months right there just on a draft document. Never mind if there has to be large revisions that have to be made, or if there are documents, and there are the things called feeder documents, right? Feeder documents that go into these documents here that aren't primary documents, but they feed into it. Those again require their own turnaround time. So I will agree. I don't like it a lot of times. It takes a long time. There's lots of red tape, and it can be very hair pulling even for me at times. But at the end of the day, the process is there for a reason, and it has to be deliberate, and I have to kind of bow to that wisdom, right? That, I'm not an on-scene coordinator where there is an imminent threat and there is a need for decisive action, to say, go clean that up right now. And we're not worried about any applicable or relevant or appropriate regulations. We just want to get that cleaned up. And that goes into time critical removal actions and things like that. So sometimes I wish that our actions can be a little bit more immediate, but there is a lot of room for error there as well. And there's a lot of problems with emergency responses not getting everything, and there having to be something, happening afterwards, some supplemental thing happening afterwards too. So.
Yeah. So no, it's definitely not a stupid question.
Not at all.
It's not at all. And again,
Big question.
we understand the frustration as well. I mean, we can definitely empathize with the frustration and that's why I wanted to start with this, when you see it, you're going, I don't understand how it could possibly take that long to do something.
I'm also thinking if we're gonna try and recruit members for this committee and you look at this and nothing really happens for 5 years, so.
And that was one thing where when we had our kind of training session, I kind of brought up in that I think as we get further into, you're gonna see that there's not gonna be this fast pace.
Yeah.
process.
still need to watch that video.
It ebbs and flows.
It ebbs
Sometimes
and
if they go
flows.
going quickly, but this is why most RABs start off quarterly meetings. So you can come here, we can get a download. You know that there's a phase 1 sampling plan being reviewed right now. And if we were having quarterly meetings, the next meeting, you would actually have that document and be able to see it. But now our next meeting basically is going to be, well, we're still reviewing that one document. So this is why in the beginning, I sort of encourage there to be a little bit more discussion around the frequency of these meetings, because it can be not only the burden on everyone to just get here every month, but these things take time and they ebb and flow. And there might be instances where there's going to be 6 months where you're not really going to see anything. There's lots of stuff happening in the background, but the public's not really going to see anything.
Yeah.
And if there were quarterly meetings, then that's only 2 meetings that you have to go where nothing's really happening. But the way it's structured now, that's 6 meetings that you're going to happen where you're going to have where there really isn't anything outwardly going on. And there's, flurry of activity going on in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
This is Carl, and I guess I have sort of a follow-up question, or I don't know, statement. I certainly appreciate CERCLA to an extent and understand it's very procedural and process driven, and there are milestones that must be met and steps that must be followed. But I guess another question I could anticipate hearing from the community or the people I work for is that, this situation, this dumping occurred decades ago, I think. I'm not sure when it was first discovered, whether it was 20 or 25 years ago, or if my timing is off, but it seems like it has been known for a very long time. And yet here we are at 2023, just seeing proposals for RI work plans and feasibility studies and things like that. And one of the questions that I could anticipate hearing is, when it was discovered so long ago, why are we just now talking about setting, timetables for these reports that, are going to come out and that begin to come out in the next few years?
No, there has been some work done. The project had some initial removal actions in the early 2000s. There has been investigations completed. We're just trying to look at that, and that's why we're calling it supplemental. We're trying to look at what do we need to get the rest of it so that it's done right and assessed properly and move forward, so that we're not going backwards and not having to come back. But yes, that is part of the frustration of what we're trying to move forward and not have happen again, is this delay in working through the CERCLA process more time.
Was there this might be off topic now, prioritization list when it came to these funds? Like, I'm assuming Portland Harbor was higher on the list to get done first before Bradford Island. Is there some kind of system like that?
Not really,
No, so depending on like a project with who the agency is or what program it falls under, there could be some prioritization.
Okay.
This is a unique one for Portland District. So with Kansas City District, like we have a group, we're assigned to all the environmental projects. They're not normally active O&M civil works projects, so it's just a little bit different. And again, I can't speak to how that prioritization was prior to, but it has priority. So.
Yeah, I can say for Portland District, this is a very high priority, high visibility project. So.
Yeah, the listing process itself, in a lot of ways, is a negotiation between EPA and the state, really. You look at, say, Gold King Mine, for instance, in Colorado. EPA had been trying to get that site listed on the NPL list for 25 years. And Colorado was actually the ones that were kind of blocking that, saying, well, it was going to ruin tourism on the mountain. And it was EPA's contractor. I'll admit it was EPA that went out there and was further evaluating, an area and then ended up damaging one of the earthen structures there and what caused that release. So, a lot of people pointed fingers at EPA because it was an EPA person out there doing that. But it really was for 20 years, for 20 something years, EPA trying to get that site listed. And it's the same thing for, Bradford Island as well. Well, I wouldn't say that that the states didn't want to, the states actually wanted Bradford Island listed. So it was a little bit different there, but a lot of times when it comes to listing, it's, if the state can handle it, then the state will handle it, and most states have adopted CERCLA. And so they get federal funds to implement that. And they have their own, penalty requirements and things like that, their own enforcement mechanisms to get money for their own Superfund actions. So that's the way a lot of these work, is that it's on a state list, state runs it, state does the cleanup, but if it gets to be to where the state maybe for one reason or another isn't able to, then it gets put on an NPL list. And that's usually a negotiation as well. So that can be why something is dumped here decades ago, and then it takes decades and decades and decades for it to get here. And, it's been listed, it was listed, in 2022? And, so from the 1940s, basically, until, the 90s, whenever they actually did the excavation. So that's 40, 50 years of this stuff just being there. So, yeah, just scooping it out usually is not enough at that point, so.
Great question. And we had one comment, that Yakima Nation supports interim actions in the river. The current PCB resident fish tissue concentrations are alarmingly high.
Yes.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I think we all support
Yeah.
actions out there.
Great comment.
Yeah, so far all parties have agreed to early action. There's been no question, at least for the upland OU, that early action is extremely critical.
Yeah, and like I said, we will assess, once we have more information, if there's some sort of early action, or again, pilot study, what have you. If we can do that, so that we have made agreement to make sure that stays on the table. Yep.
For the river.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments on the SMP schedule, excuse me, the site management plan schedule? Retraining myself. Yes.
I have a general question there. As everyone knows, Hanford has leaking tanks up there. Those tanks have material coming out, and it's going to be a matter of time until it gets to Columbia River. And your time schedule up here looks like it would probably include time when that gets to the river. Have any parameters or thought been given to dealing with the pollution from Hanford getting in the river and then coming downriver? One thing you'd have to be dealing with that is cleaning up that site. What levels would be dangerous out there?
Absolutely. I mean, I can say for EPA side, Hanford is a extreme priority for us. We have a whole team of people. We have a whole satellite office dedicated to Hanford and getting that site cleaned up. And lots of smart people that I'll admit, some of them, maybe not all of them, but some of them smarter than me. And that's a good thing. I mean, there's always the concern for upriver contaminants coming down and affecting the work. You see it a lot at Portland Harbor as well. But that's just kind of the nature of the business, right? We have to be able to mitigate the pollution that we have in front of us. And I think, I mean, I wouldn't say that anything coming from Hanford, we would say, well, that's just background or,
Right.
I mean, it would be, if something leaked out of Hanford to the point where it got to Bradford Island, I think that there's a lot more, that's worrying on degrees that,
Yeah.
on the degrees that Bradford Island itself wouldn't,
Yeah,
wouldn't
we
have.
start getting into who's responsible for what portion, because of that commingling and things like that, but we do, look at what our current background is, if we saw something, we have to identify, oh wait, we have some other sources feeding into it, or
Or-
Yeah,
or-
I would hope that we would know
I-
about it long before it got to Bradford Island, yeah. Yeah, that is a ecological disaster on par with Gold King mine, you know, or worse, or worse. So, yeah, Hanford is an extreme priority for EPA, I will totally agree with that, and.
Great. You ready to move on to talk about dates? Great, upcoming meeting dates. So we've already kind of touched on talking about various influences on meeting dates, upcoming. So a couple things to keep in mind. We are actively recruiting the Corps would recommend having an opportunity for the public to both understand there's a recruitment going on and have an opportunity to sit in a meeting. And then the next time that the Corps is gonna have substantial information to bring to the RAB to present to you is going to be, we think likely December is the right time to come in and talk about that phase 1 river operable unit work plan. So those are the various factors. So, you know, we talked about before possibilities of doing project status via RAB meeting dates. I think this is a good time to talk about whether we want to continue on the monthly drumbeat or whether we want to consider another month for project updates and then.
Yeah, on the website. We would do
Yeah,
all
on the
the on the website in the interim, but then we would present in December. And then I think what the thought was is, depending on folks' thoughts, we could do if whatever the meeting is, we would do the RAB advertisement and to be like, you know, so many days after that meeting, whether it's 20, 15 or 20 or 30 days after that meeting, then it would close.
Well, I'll say again, I know it's not quiet here, but I'll say again that quarterly meetings of RABs is very standard. We have long time frames here. If there's going to be months where we're not being able to communicate to the public some of these things, even though there are things going on in the background.
Right.
And as Megan said, it's going to be December before they're even able to present a workable river work plan to the RAB. So, you know, I would encourage taking October and November.
Because like I said,
off.
and again, we would be looking to provide that, that presentation when we're presenting kind of what that phase work is proposed to be and what's been reviewed by FA parties. We would provide it ahead of the meeting, so people could have a chance to look at it and digest it. And be able to bring their questions to the meeting, so that if there's something that we can address or incorporate or just respond to now, we can do that, and anything else we can say, we're gonna take this and we're gonna hold it back, and we'll bring it up again when we get to phase 2.
I did want to provide one point of clarity. We've talked about this a few times, the meeting frequency. The Corps will absolutely support whatever frequency the RAB.
Right, like I said.
Yeah,
our
EPA as well. We're not voting members, so
Our,
whatever. you
yeah,
want to say.
so as I said, our recommendation is to meet in December and do updates on the website for October and November, but again, that's just our recommendation, we leave it up to the RAB members.
So we'll open it up for a RAB member discussion, and then I will be looking for a RAB member to make a motion, whether that motion was to continue on the monthly drumbeat to meet next time in December, or any variation that the RAB sees fit.
Didn't we already decide last meeting to go every other month? Or am I wrong? I thought we were.
It was not
Not
routinely,
every
it was that the month was gonna be skipped. but
Well,
not-
I thought it was through this calendar year.
I don't know that we made an
No, I
official
think-
decision, but I
no.
think it did come up as
Yeah,
an idea to do every other month. I think, yeah. I think the main concern with pushing to quarterly meetings is that we have a daily concerning health exposure that people are experiencing and to let 3 months go by between meetings feels problematic, given the urgency that some of us, most of us feel about that public health exposure. I think when we're actively recruiting for new members, it also might make sense to have, more than quarterly meetings to give folks, like we talked about, an opportunity to attend a meeting or two before we've wrapped the period of recruiting new members. And then, just, this is like a side note, but thinking about, if we do kind of extend our meeting times out, how we can facilitate communication in between those meetings. And thinking, maybe starting with maybe we have a Google space where we have different folders. Here's all the meeting minutes in this folder, here's resources in this folder. So we all have, so I'm sure people are like me going through emails and going where was the meeting minutes for that meeting? And, having them all in one.
I don't know if we brought up, if this was done last time, that we have a new sub-page on our Bradford website that's specifically for the RAB, and it's got links to all the meeting minutes and
Right.
video recordings.
Okay.
We'll also post the advertisement and the application there as well.
Okay,
So we made that a separate page to the actual project website.
that's great. Yeah, that's really helpful to have all that.
I forgot about that, we had done that to kind of be able to, again, make it very quick, people can get to that information. And so I'll say two things. So for the first one about, again, we have the ongoing exposure. That really just goes back to kind of we showed in the presentation, is that things are just not going to move that fast. For the second part with making it available for the members, I would almost say the same thing, that having a meeting that they're going to be able to see more versus being able to chance to come to meeting and not really getting a full view of what they're gonna expect, versus if it's December, then they're seeing more information being presented, they have a better idea of maybe what's involved, versus if we meet in October and our project updates are still reviewing the work plan, there hasn't been any progress. So that would be my kind of 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that came up, maybe not last meeting, but the time before, was maybe there's other things the RAB can do in the meantime, having to do with community education. And of course, that depends on how much folks are interested in getting engaged in that. But yeah, I think also, from my perspective, we don't always have to have an in-person 2-hour meeting with slides. We could decide to say, this month we're gonna meet virtually for 45 minutes and give this many, just quick updates, round of questions, kind of thing. It doesn't always have to, from my perspective, we can cater it to what serves us best. It doesn't always have to be kind of going through the motions of here's the presentation and everything, but maybe we have a 15-minute update. And we can record the meeting and make a recording available, or, I'm just thinking we could be flexible about how we approach some of it, so. I feel more comfortable knowing we have those options before agreeing to changing out of the monthly meeting space. Because I think, that would be another, addressing a concern of how do we not lose momentum, even as.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understand that. And that's what I said, whether it's something like that, or if, again, commitment from the core side, that we want to make sure that we keep the main webpage with, this is the project status update for this month, this is for this month, and keeping track of those so that it's all very clear on what projects that we can present on as being, is out there for everybody. So, which again, we can do, anyway, we need to, so.
I posted the link to the RAP specific page in the chat.
Thank you.
I would suggest regular email blasts of that link, because
Oh, yeah.
I forget too.
I think for our, when we send out, and I think for our, did our last notice have that yet? Yeah, so when we have the notices, we're sending out that.
Great.
That link specifically now.
That's helpful.
And so again, we're continuing to tweak the webpage, we're trying to make it so again, if anyone goes to either the project website or the RAP website and want to make suggestions, we're able to do it. We wanna, again, make it worthwhile for folks and, meet expectations for the public on that.
So maybe to help members kind of come to a thought on what they want to do for these next couple of meetings. I'll just offer what I think we're gonna have available, by these dates. So by 10 October, I project that we would have, a small status on member recruiting, like where we've been able to post that information. We will have some more information figured out about the visitor center displays. We may not at that point have that information ready to show the graph. It just depends how much progress we can get on deciding what information we think needs to be there, and then how we kind of display that. In terms of like graphically how we're going to display that. So we may have more to say on visitor center displays at that point, we may not. I think definitely by November, we'll have a lot more traction on that. And that would probably be a time we can, if nothing else, target to provide. That, I think that would be a good target time frame for us to provide a presentation about that. By November, if there is not a formal request to extend the review of that phase 1 river work plan, by November, we can status that we have received comments. But we may not have a lot of information to bring, so we'll still be, we're digesting those comments. Typically that first couple of weeks, we're really combing through comments and figuring out the big ones that we need to handle first. So we may not have a lot to say about those comments. There'll probably not be much to say about the work plan in general. Except to say that we either have received all our comments or we've gotten a request to extend the review. And then December is that first time that we're projecting we're gonna have a big presentation.
Yeah, I think that's where we're gonna shoot for, trying to present what the work's gonna be.
So that's kind of like what's gonna be available in those timeframes.
And if we were to have a site visit, what is it a decent time of year to do that, or what would that, maybe we could do that in lieu of a meeting at some point? Or,
Or the meeting, we were just gonna look to see what your guys' availability is, so whether it's during the day or it's evening.
because maybe we could, instead of a meeting, do that, and then if there's updates, we could share them, when we get together.
I mean, you have that auditorium space.
Yes,
Right,
we do,
probably.
yeah, we do. That's where we're gonna be, so.
I would suggest the earlier.
Yeah.
Before there's ice all over the place.
Yes, I was gonna say, for the site visit, we'll try to schedule that fairly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking about having it in lieu of a RAD meeting, let's just do it on 10 October.
Yeah.
That'll be my
That's- yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah, it's already a predetermined date, so.
I think that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, and we can go during the day, and that way we won't be here at
At
City
night,
Hall at
yeah.
night, from 5 to 7.
You know, it's
during the
gonna
day.
be dark, but.
Daylight savings time, yeah.
yeah, okay.
Well, at least I'm not driving into the sunset.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Very sad, the sun's already down.
Can I make a request of one of my rapid members to make a formal motion?
Yeah, I will motion to, in lieu of a meeting here on October 10th, hold a site visit at Bradford Island. Have the November 14th meeting be a virtual meeting only, and then December 12th be in person, hopefully reviewing the phase 1 draft plan.
A second.
Excellent. Okay, so over to our RAB members that are online. Sorry, give me one sec. I'm on the wrong screen. Bear with me. I'll call for votes. Christie,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes.
Andrea.
Yes.
I believe that's everyone we have online, correct? All right, great. So we're all in lost the word, so we're obviously very close to the end of the meeting. It's agreement, thank you. All right, great, so, yeah, excellent, thank you all for
I
that.
guess- Follow up on that, if we're doing it during the day, obviously work might get in some people's way, would there be a secondary site visit for those who can't make that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I will still follow up with Brad members outside this meeting to figure out what the right time to have that site visit during the day. And then for anyone who cannot attend on October 10th, we'll absolutely have supplemental site visit.
Are there restrictions for access to Bradford Island in certain parts of the day, like business hours or anything like that? I'm not, the west side behind the gate, I mean,
That's what I want to check on.
Yeah.
I'm not sure of, if
Yeah.
there's a,
or east side, I'm sorry, I should say.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll have to double check.
see what our limitations are there.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll get that information first and then I'll follow up with folks and then we can kind of figure out what time frame works within those hours if they are there.
That's great.
All right, excellent.
Field trip.
Right, so, that brings us really to the end of the meeting. We do have a couple minutes remaining if there are any additional comments, questions, be it from RAD members or members of our community.
Oh, please.
Yes.
The site visit, did you say community members?
Community members too, for the site visit?
We have been talking about specifically RAD members, but
Rad members, okay, I thought you said, I thought it said rad members and community, and I just wondered. We don't have any kind of fancy clearing anything, so.
yeah, I mean.
I was just curious,
And, you know, as government folks, we can arrange for members of the public to have, access to the funds appropriate. I guess the question really becomes, is that what the RAD members wanna try to open up to? Whether we wanna do RAD members tour the site to have a better understanding, or whether they're asking for a, larger site visit that would be open to community members.
well, that's okay.
I'd say my 2 cents would again, the RAB's gotta be able to kind of be that touch point, be able to take the information and disseminate it, that it's more critical for them to see it, and then we start to get into more of, risk, the more that we keep it, we open it for more people. So I would say, I would say, unfortunately, my recommendation would be for RAB members only.
Yeah, unfortunately, it can be a little bit, you know, you don't get to the point where you're holding a flag and bullhorn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
But again, I think too, part of that is with the visitor center displays that was suggested to kind of help bridge that for the general public. But I don't think it's a bad idea for the RAB, since you need to have a better understanding than, public community members of it. Yeah.
No, that's okay.
Okay, no, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Good question, yeah, not a problem, it's okay.
Yeah, I'd agree to limit it to just RAD members.
All right. Other questions, comments? Anything online?
Christy had a question about calendar invite and availability and itinerary, and I just messaged her to let her know that you'll be sending out a doodle poll for availability that day. And once you guys determine
Yes, we will.
best availability that day, you'll send out the calendar invite and itinerary and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll pull all that together on the board side.
Yeah, because we'll need information from those attending that we need to coordinate with on the bill.
Yes. I don't see anything else. Okay. Is there a motion to close the meeting?
I will motion to adjourn.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time today and,
Thanks, y'all.
we'll see RAD members in October. We'll see everyone else in November for an online meeting.
thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Great meeting.
Was a good meeting.
Right on time. We're debating on whether this is gonna take the entire 2 hours or not. Ain't gonna get people like me that's so long-winded, we can still die.